Hi, I'm Jason, and today I wanted to walk through my deck tech for Goro-Goro, Disciple of Ryusei. More and more I find that the commanders I'm drawn to are those that appear not that powerful or interesting on the surface, but once you start delving deeper, you realize that it's a lot like an ogre, and there are many layers to it. I felt this way about Griswold before I ever put him together, and as I started brewing that deck, I realized just how many different things you could do with that deck, and Goro-Goro is the most recent example of this style of commander. On the surface, he looks like a random 2/2, not that powerful. He gives some creatures haste, and he can make some dragons, but you have to jump through hoops to do that, not to mention it's a lot of mana. But then you realize that there are so many different aspects to him that you can take advantage of. He gives your creatures haste, which allows you to use a lot of creatures that want to deal combat damage to players, banking on the fact that they might not have a blocker the turn that you cast those creatures. He has a mana-intensive, repeatable ability, so you really don't mind playing a lot of ramp and lands in this deck. He makes 5/5 flying dragons, which means anything that cares about ferocious, flying creatures or dragons are going to be synergistic with him. And then he also cares about modified creatures, which means any equipment, auras, and counters are going to synergize as well. Not to mention, you have to be attacking with a creature, so in addition to the fact that he gives everything haste, he pushes you into a very aggressive strategy. There are so many different axes that you can build this deck on that I was able to incorporate lots of different aspects of them, making a really interesting, diverse deck, but you could also pick one more specific strategy, like say just enchantments or just equipment, and make a really interesting deck that way too. The first thing we want to do is figure out how to modify our creatures so that we can start pumping out dragons. And the best way to do this is to use creatures that modify themselves. Stromkirk Noble, Markov Blademaster, and Thundering Raiju all want to be attacking and get counters for doing so. Hangerback Walker, Runaway Steamkin, and Legion Warboss are also creatures that get counters on them and add a lot of other utility, like making creatures, making mana, and those two things, making creatures and mana. What more could you want? We don't have that many auras in this deck because, let's face it, red auras are not necessarily the best most of the time, but we do actually play two auras from 2022, and that's Unquenchable Fury, which comes back over and over, allowing us to modify several of our creatures, and Sticky Fingers, which is cheap, gives evasion, gives mana ramp, and also replaces itself when your creature dies. And of course, probably Red's favorite way to modify our creatures is equipment. Of course, we have some of the really powerful ones you're going to see in almost any deck that wants equipment. Shadow Spear, Commander's Plate, Blade of Selves, Black Blade Reforged, Basilisk Collar, and of course, if you're playing red, Embercleave. These are all super powerful. And then the reconfigure equipment from Kamigawa are super powerful because they are both creatures and equipment. Currently, I only have Lizard Blades in here because my Ogre Headhelm is in another deck, and my Rabbit Battery is in my cube, but those would be great inclusions too. I just happen to have them elsewhere. And then I also have a Sword of Fortune Frontier because I was lucky enough to open one. Any of the swords pretty much are going to be great in this deck, so you put in your favorite or all 10 of them. That would be a lot, but also would be super powerful because these cards are kind of busted. Honestly, this one does have a little anti-synergy in this deck because it gives protection from red, and we have a couple things that want to target our creatures with a red spell, for example, Embercleave. So probably not the best one, but it's the one I got. So then, because Goro-Goro makes tokens and a couple of our modified creatures also happen to make tokens, I decided to lean into a token sub-theme using cards that have myriad, like Genasi Enforcers and Null Warband, but also random cards like Emrakul's Hatcher, which is 4 bodies for 5 mana, Stentia Uprising, which is a really sweet token maker / removal spell, Aki Emberkeeper, which works for our modified theme, Tillinolli Summoner, which is a really powerful card that I think a lot of people have forgotten about, but it does a lot of work in this deck. Loyal Apprentice is, of course, a great card, really cheap too, so you play Goro-Goro on 2 and then Loyal Apprentice on 3. You have so many creatures attacking really quickly, you get more every single turn. Annex Hardened in the Forge, super powerful card. Of course, it goes well with Embercleave. That was a standard very potent combo. Our curve in the deck is pretty low, but we do get a lot of mana because of our mana sinks. So we do have a Chandra Flamecaller, which is able to make a couple tokens every single turn, or wheel our hand, or deal a bunch of damage to creatures. She kind of does it all. One of my favorite cards that I was able to get into this deck that has done so much work is 5 Alarm Fire. Every time any of your creatures deals combat damage to anything, you put a counter on here and you remove 5 counters to deal 5 damage to anything. So if you use Tillinolli Summoner, for example, to make, 10/1/1, something like that, which is something that happened in a game that I played a couple weeks ago, this thing ramps up super quickly and can be dealing 10, 20, 30 damage at once, instant speed. absolutely insane card in the right deck, and I think this is the right deck. Some other token payoffs: Hero of Oxid Ridge, Impact Tremors, of course, Devilish Valet is a sweet one, and Dark Dweller Oracle as a little bit of card advantage. We talked about getting synergy with all of the different parts of Goro-Goro, right? So that includes the dragons. So getting a 5/5 flying dragons over and over is going to be really helpful with Spit Flame. This just acts as a removal spell that keeps coming back every single time we use Goro-Goro's ability. And then Bolt Bend is a really cheap deflecting swat, essentially. This has been a card that a lot of people have had their eye on for a while as a budget replacement for deflecting swat or any sort of misdirection. But in this deck, our commander is not 4 power, but first of all, he can get to 4 power pretty easily with a lot of our equipment, but he also just pumps out 5/5 creatures, and Bolt Bend is just a very powerful card, especially when you're in mono red and you don't have that much powerful on the stack interaction anyway. Bolt Bend is a lifesaver. As far as card draw, mono red has gotten a lot of help in this area in the last couple of years. Almost all of my burst card draw or draw engines were printed in the last 3 years, so you can really see how much card advantage red has gotten recently. Of course, Jeska's Will is an all-star, especially in this deck. I know it's great in every single deck, but being able to curve out Goro-Goro on turn 2 into a Jeska's Will on turn 3 is very powerful. Yes, if you do that, you lose the ability to get a land off Jeska's Will, and when you hit 3 lands off of Jeska's Will, like I did last week, then it's pretty painful. But if you actually hit spells and get like 7 mana, because it's really early and people might not have that many plays early, then it gets really, really powerful. I don't need to tell you how good Jeska's Will is. It's a good card. Talking about another just as good 3-drop red card that you should be playing, Curse of Hospitality. I'm mostly kidding. This card isn't that good, but when we attack with 10 creatures at a player, then we can draw 10 cards from their deck, essentially. We can play a couple of them that turn. Curse of Hospitality gets a lot better when you're swinging with 8 or 9 creatures as opposed to like 2 creatures. So this deck can use it pretty effectively. Reforge the Soul is, of course, a Wheel of Fortune that is a lot cheaper, not in mana cost, but in monetary dollars, the real green stuff, the stuff that matters. So Reforge the Soul, a fine card for sure. Endless Atlas, we're playing 28 mountains or so it's not too hard to turn this online, and then it starts drawing you a card every single turn for just a couple of mana. It's good in monocolored decks. You know that. Also, maybe good in monocolored decks. I'm trying it out, and I'm not sure how I love it. Zenith Chronicler. It does let all of your opponents draw a spell, except for the person casting a multicolored spell. Seeing as that's never going to be you, you're always going to be drawing when it triggers. But giving your other opponents cards isn't necessarily what you want to be doing. That said, it's also a 3/1 for 2, so it attacks very well, which is definitely what you want in this deck. You want a lot of aggressive creatures. So I've tried it out a few times. It's drawn me a couple cards. It's not been too bad. I haven't taken it out yet. So I've been enjoying it actually quite a bit. Tawashi Guidebot is not probably the best draw engine, but we modify a lot of creatures. This is just another way to do that. And you can be drawing a card for 1 or sometimes 0 mana off of it. And it's not too difficult to get there. It's in theme and it's a card draw engine, plus it attacks in a pinch. Valakut Awakening is a land that also wheels yourself. It's very powerful. And then Tectonic Reformation. We're playing 40 lands in this deck because Goro-Goro has such a mana-intensive ability, but sometimes we get flooded out. Tectonic Reformation is really helpful in that case, being able to cycle all of those lands into other spells. Now we get to my favorite section, which is just the assorted cards that I was able to jam into the deck, whether they fit with the theme or maybe they're just good in mono red, and I've been really enjoying how they play. So without further ado, Shrine of Burning Rage is just a really big removal spell if it needs to be, but it's also can hit your opponent for 12 damage or something like that. Cast it on turn 2 and let it sit there for several turns and then just dome someone out for 10 or 15, or just use it as a removal spell, 4 or 5 damage, pick something off. Not too bad. I shouldn't have to tell you what this guy's name is. We can all read, plain as day. All will be one. So Urabrask the Hidden gives all your creatures haste, and most importantly makes it so your opponents can't block the turn that they play a creature. Makes it so much easier to get in for damage. And in case you don't want to spend that red mana on Goro-Goro, gives all your creatures haste. Tectonic Giant attacks really well, dies really well. He kind of just does it all. Not super exciting, but a good card for sure. Avatar of Fury. This is a card that I got in the Riku of Two Reflections commander deck back in the day when I originally bought that when it was $25. Avatar of Fury, I don't know if it's great. You have to wait really long for it to be cheap, but the game does usually go that long, and having a really cheap threat is actually rather important in this deck because we can play it for cheap, maybe cast Goro-Goro again, or just activate his ability, suit the avatar up with a bunch of equipment. We almost always have something to do with our mana, so it's not like that mana is going to go to waste if we top deck it on turn 10. Carlock, Fury of Avernus, is insane. Whenever you attack, not with Carlock, not with your commander, any attacks, you get an extra combat phase. Also, they gain first strike and they untap. So it can also just be vigilance if you really needed. Absolutely insane, especially when you have many, many tokens. Elena Kessig Trapper is kind of a weird one, but she works really well with Goro-Goro. If you pay 5 mana to make a 5/5 flying dragon with Goro-Goro, Elena taps for 5 red mana, meaning you can activate it again. So anytime you activate Goro-Goro, you're going to get an additional dragon. Super great at making just a giant wave of dragons to kill your opponents with. Fury Storm is just a sweet card in general. More people should be playing it probably. Copy target instant or sorcery, choose new targets, but you get a copy of this for every single time you've cast your commander. The best part is when your commander costs 2, this can easily copy something 4 or 5 times. It is absolutely insane. I copied a Debt to the Deathless for like 10 life, doubled, so 20 life. I copied that 4 times, and they died really bad. And the last card in this section, my boy, Koth of the Hammer. You know, mono red wants to play Koth. He's in here. He's giving you mana. He's untapping your mountains. He's making them 4/4s. He's also giving you emblems. He's insane. And by that, I mean I haven't gotten a chance to play with him. Here are 10 cards that are kind of just, yeah, they're going to be in red decks, kind of staples. Every single one of these is just absolutely insane. No question why they would be in here at all. They're all equally good and give you exactly what you need. As far as mana base, you got a whole bunch of mountains, but the important lands are the ones that can modify your creatures. Forge of Heroes and Tyrite Sanctum are both great at doing that. The ones that draw cards, Roadside Reliquary can draw 2 cards pretty often. Arch of Araska can draw cards if you have a ton of mana to sink into it, which sometimes we do. And Spinerock Knoll, you can actually be dealing 7 damage pretty often in this deck. I've put Spinerock Knoll in who knows how many decks, so many decks, and almost never can I activate it. This is the deck. This deck, whether you're going wide with 15 little elementals or tall with a giant Blackblade Reforged Embercleaved creature, you're going to be dealing 7 damage to a player almost every single turn. So it does work. And then what I like to call the insurance package, a way to deal with graveyards. Often that's a Bojuka Bog, but in a non-black deck, that's Scavenger Grounds. A way to deal with lands, Ghost Quarter, Strip Mine, or Wasteland if you want to go that route. And then just a board wipe on a land. I mean, how can you beat it? Blast Zone's pretty good, dude. Oh, and somehow this snuck to the bottom of my deck, but Throes of Chaos is just kind of a cool card. It does a lot of stuff. It gives you an outlet for more mana in case you just keep drawing lands and don't have your Tectonic Reformation, for example. It triggers your Runaway Steamkin and your Shrine of Burning Rage twice, assuming you cascade into another red spell, which is almost all of them. And it's honestly just really fun. Almost everything you're going to cascade into is going to be removal, card draw, or a permanent, so you're really never missing. And it's just a really fun card. And then pretty much every single mountain you can find. Try to find as many of the pretty ones as you can. I only have the one, sad face. And that's the deck. Despite mono red being the notoriously worst color in Commander, for a long time it was white, but white's gotten a lot of powerhouse cards in the last couple of years, and most players now consider red to be the worst color. Despite that, I feel like this deck is actually able to offset a lot of red's weaknesses. The deck doesn't have a ton of ramp, but while everyone else is ramping, we're able to start applying pressure from as early as turn 2, attacking with a Stromkirk Noble or a haste creature, and start beating face. This is going to decrease the amount of time players have to just idly sit by and ramp because we're attacking them very quickly and our creatures are growing while we're doing it, throwing equipment on them. So by the time that they actually play a blocker, if it's a chump blocker on like turn 4 or something like that, maybe we already have a giant creature swinging in at them. We also have a good amount of card draw, and as I've said a few times, always has something to do with our mana. There have been several times where I wish I had 10 mana just to spend on equip costs because I have 4 equipment on the field and I just don't have enough mana to make it work. So we're never hurting for things to use our mana on. We just have so many mana sinks in our commander, in our equipment, in some other spells that we have no shortage of use for our mana. We can always use more, but we don't want to spend our first few turns ramping because that's when we are our strongest and able to actually hurt our opponent without them having chump blockers. I don't know what I'm saying, dude. If you like attacking, tokens, auras, equipment, +1/+1 counters, other types of counters, burn, haste, dragons, flying, tokens, goblins, samurai, you're going to like this deck. There's so much to love. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe, etc. We really appreciate it. And also, check out our Wrath Weatherlight Stalwart commander deck, because that is such a fun commander. Another cheap commander who likes tokens, but you're also able to use Spellslinger strategies and also tap and untap shenanigans for a lot of really fun gameplay. So make sure to check it out.